presentation of this session, contribution of information technologies to last planner system implementation.
Oops, sorry. Yeah, here we go. All right, so this paper is contributions of information technologies to the Aspire system implementation, and it was made by me, Camilo Lagos, Rodrigo Herrera, and Luis Fernando Larcón. So we all know that the Aspire system has been implemented for over 20 years and in many projects throughout the world, but still most projects only achieve a medium level of maturity and a medium level of implementation. In fact, implementation of some specific components haven't still reached the sufficient maturity in order to allow the use of the full potential of the Aspire system. In fact, the focus seems to be put on short-term planning components like the measurement of the PPC, the analysis of causes of non-completion, and weekend planning meetings. But medium-term components only reach medium levels of implementation, and further components like the use of the executable work inventory, the root cause analysis, and the management of corrective actions only reach low levels of implementation. So the problem is that the insufficient degree of implementation of the aforementioned components prevents the complete use of the Aspire potential. And moreover, the adoption of components such as the look ahead and specifically a midterm planning components, it's highly correlated to a performance indicator. So therefore, what we are missing is the capability to use the full potential of the system. The opportunity is that information technologies has already proved to support implementation of the Aspire system and resulted in more comprehensive implementations of Aspire and better performance. Although the IT support has not been used completely in most projects, it can still improve the collection of information and make it more available for people. Therefore, it is expected that since you can actually collect and make available more information regarding the specific components that are usually not further implemented, you could enhance the performance of the project and the level of implementation of those components. So the aims of this research are to first to analyze the effect of the use of IT system on the level of implementation of those specific components. Then to identify which LPS components possibly correlate to the PPC, and finally demonstrate that in fact components are both correlated to the PPC and also that have significant improvements with the use of IT systems. So for that we planned 3 research questions. The first one was which LPS components have significant improvements in their level of implementation by the use of IT support. The second one is what LPS components present a significant correlation between the level of implementation and PPC. And thirdly, if a conjunction is found between the components in both questions, then IT systems improve specific components that are specifically correlated to better performance. And the methodology that we use is first we created and validated a metric to measure the level of implementation of the Aspire system, which was based in Bernardo Sanformoso's PVP index. And what we did is that we divided it into 80 sub-criteria, which were 5 sub-criteria for each of the 16 components that were first presented by Bernardo Sanformoso. And then we assessed the level of implementation of a sample of 18 construction projects, which all completed a 4-month implementation by LPS consultants, and the direct person in charge of the implementations were the one who assessed the projects. And finally, we did an analysis of the correlation of the level of the Aspire implementation and performance, and also an analysis of statistical significances of the difference between the IT-aided projects and traditionally aided projects. And here are the 16 criteria that we analyzed, plus we averaged the 16 criteria for a general level of implementation. And you can see that we measured from general standardization of the planning and control process to very specific aspects as communication and teamwork, the use of corrective actions for causes of non-compliances, etc. And what we found is the following. There are in fact several significant differences in projects that use IT systems. And actually, like the average general level of implementation is 22% higher in projects that use these kinds of systems because they support the whole process. And in fact, there are some critical aspects like the critical analysis of information, which is almost as double when you use IT systems to support them. The other relevance are the standardization of planning and control process for the same reasons I just said. Then we did the correlation analysis between those components and the PPC, and we also found out that there are several components that are correlated to the PPC. And here we found out that 4 specific components are highly correlated to the PPC, and especially the use of the executable work inventory and also the standardization of intermediate planning. Corrective action based on causes of non-compliances were high too, and the general level of implementation was also really correlated to the PPC level of those projects. So what happens when we analyze the PPC differences between projects that have high implementations and low implementations of the components that I just mentioned? We again see that the use of, for example, EWI commitments, which is the executable work inventory, causes a 13% difference in the PPC. I mean, you can go from a PPC of 60% to a PPC of 73% by just improving the way of how you use the workable backlog of tasks. And if you conjoin the analysis of results, you can conclude that projects with IT support have a higher general level of implementation of Last Planner, which is also correlated to the PPC. And that means that IT can potentially help projects to improve the weekly accomplishment of commitments. And also, 2 of the components that were significantly correlated to the PPC were also improved by the use of the IT software. And those were the standardization of the planning control process, which incremented the PPC by 5% and incremented the level of implementation of the component by 49% if we used IT. And the second one was the systematic analysis and systematic removal of constraints, which also made an improvement of 7% of the PPC and improved the level of implementation by 26%. So again, we're improving the systematic process of planning and control, and we're also improving the intermediate planning, and specifically looking for constraints. So the conclusions are basically 2. The first one is that if IT systems are used to support Last Planner, where implementation standards are achieved globally, and specifically in several elements, and of those, maybe the most critical components are the critical analysis of information and the analysis of systematic removal of constraints. And the degree of implementation of Last Planner is positively correlated with the PPC, and specifically for another bunch of components, of which the most important are the standardization of the planning and control process, the exclusive use of EWI commitments, and the systematic analysis and removal of constraints. And also, as we just said before, when we link the results, we can distinguish 2 critical components, which are the standardization of the planning and control process and the systematic analysis and systematic removal of constraints. So, The contributions that we just saw were a metric to assess the level of last planner implementation, the assessment of the implementation of 18 projects, the correlations between specific components and performance, the identification of degrees of improvement associated with the higher implementation of specific components, and finally, the validation of the positive impacts of IT8 system in last planner implementation levels and performance, which was measured by the BBC. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So I'm trying to understand what I'm learning from your paper, and I have two related questions. So I understand that companies that use IT seem to be somewhat more sophisticated in their implementation of last plan, right? That's kind of what you're saying. But I'm trying to understand if that's a chicken or egg problem. Right?
What?
We call it a chicken and egg problem. What comes first? So I'm wondering if you have any data as to how long people have been using these IT solutions and what they did before they used the IT solution, right? Because I can imagine that my general recommendation is when people start with that planning system that they do it by hand on paper, right?
Yeah.
And then as they get better, soon Excel gets used. So that's your first IT solution, and then soon, depending on how many things you have programmed, how many macros you have programmed in Excel, how good you are, you can do most of it in Excel, if not everything in Excel, but not everybody wants to program Excel because sometimes people then move into some kind of a web-based shared environment, right? So there's sort of a progression. And admittedly, if that's the case, the people that use the web-based systems are going to be much more sophisticated in using Last Planner and just probably even better PPC because they've gone through all these different steps. So I'm a little hesitant to take your conclusions for granted because in some way they seem to suggest that if you use IT, you're going to be better at using Last Planner. And that, I don't think, is what you have shown.
So
we need to be really careful.
all right. So the thing is, we're actually comparing the same type of projects. They have the same levels of knowledge of the system, even though they have different levels of implementation. And they are both type projects that completed just 4 months of implementation, but by the same type of consultants with the same process, the exact same methodology of implementation, and you still see the results. And what we have learned after implementing the solution for a while is that actually what the solution does and what Excel cannot do is that it keeps you going through the whole steps in the same order and asking for the same things every single time. So you standardize your planning and control process, and that helps you to realize where are your flaws and to use the last planning system more systematically. I don't know what. I think Luis Fernando can answer that question better later on, but he has seen the whole process of the development of this software.
Well, I can hear. I believe that in this case, we try to compare, to prevent that problem. We try to compare projects that are coming from partners because we're in the same stage of implementation, and some of them using IT, the others without using IT. Because there are other cases where we promote also the use of the hands first, and then jump to IT. But this was a comparison of two approaches. And it also validates previous research we had done in design thinking, comparing with Excel, with support without, and with and without, and the results are similar.
Thais Alves, San Diego State University. I like your paper, but I also want to recognize what Iris said, and it just occurred to me a passage of Adam Grant's book. I cannot remember the title, I was trying to check now. So he talks about the story. This is just a provocative question, maybe to help explain what Iris just said. he describes a study in his book, and I can dig that and send it to you, that a company, a call center, had people who would stay in the job of the call center, and some people would just quit after a while with the same training, same everything. And they looked at everything to see what drove those people to stay. And what they figured out, the only difference in everything that they looked at was people who used Internet Explorer and Safari versus Google Chrome or Firefox. And they said, what can it possibly be that these things are influencing these people? The people who use Firefox and Chrome had one extra step to make to do the work. They were looking for something better. They wouldn't just be using what was offered by Microsoft or Apple.
Yeah.
So that single step showed that they had a drive to do things better for their own benefit. So that might be a good thing for you to look, in the external literature on something related to that. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah, thank you very much for your comment, because like when I was finishing my master's thesis with Luis Fernando, we were exploring something similar but related to how projects manage information, and so the solution that we found for that problem is to test it transversally and longitudinality. I mean, we tested first a large sample of projects on a single specific time, and would measure their performance and also their level of implementation. So we said, all right, this might be pure luck, or this might be that the projects that we're looking are more interested in Last Planner than the projects without IT systems. So then what we did is that we took a bunch of projects, and I actually implemented the methodology in those projects. So, I did it first for a while with only a part of the software, and then with the complete software, using the whole capabilities. And all projects in which we did that performed better in the second stages. So what we have learned about it is that it's just, it can be a bunch of factors, but the whole process of the IT system consistently contributes to perform better, because you are forced to do every single step of the Last Planner system every single time in the same way. And it puts more information available, so you actually learn from what you have been doing so much time.
We have time for one last question.
I am like you. I love IT. And, and I think that, but working from that perspective, I have a bias, and my bias is for IT. And I'm currently learning to respect analog. And I'm learning to recognize that there's actually very good last point implementation without IT, and trying to figure out how to measure that and recognize that. So I wonder if your metric to assess last planner level of implementation can be applied without IT, and therefore maybe we should not just focus about IT. It might be just the characteristics of what, the behaviors. I think your thing about metrics to assess last planner level implementations, I think it would be better to think about the behaviors or the kind of principles that each team can do, sort of within that circumstance, and also, I'm just sort of saying that we may have a bias that we don't see when we're doing this. And also, I'll mention, I know that the Lean Construction Institute they're trying to release a level last planner standard for implementation and assessment. I don't exactly agree with it, and I think you should look at it when it gets released and think about how it parallels with you or enhances what you do. So.
Sure. Thank you for your comments. I think you're right. There's always a bias to how people like to implement Last Planner, or what people prefer in Last Planner. What I think is that, you need to learn the concepts and the basics, and those things you cannot learn it with IT. I mean, IT by its own, it's not gonna support the loss prevention system. This is not gonna teach you, and it's not gonna have the experience that people who have gone through 1 and 2 or 3 projects, or people who have done like a pool planning using Post-its, it's gonna have. So it's just complementary. The thing is, what the importance of this is not saying you should do last planning with IT and you should start right away with IT. What we're saying is that if you care to use it and you start using it, you're gonna be able to take more advantage of the experience and the knowledge that you can have with traditional implementations.
Thank you very much for 3 wonderful presentations and a great discussion. So